right, my friends, a couple really exciting things in the dental news world for this week. So I'm really excited because you guys are eating it up right now. We've had such great banter and discussion on insurance woes, and then last week's amalgam discussion is getting a little heated online as well. And everybody has their camp, so I get it. But let's talk about a couple things that are happening. I can feel that we're coming out of the summer and that things are starting to heat back up, a lot of activity. Pennsylvania, looking at you. And I love what's happening in Pennsylvania right now. We're going to talk about House Bill 2722. It was introduced at the end of July. It's basically requiring that any statement a dental insurer makes about a benefit verbally, electronically, or in writing would be binding for claim adjudication and patient benefit determination. So the only exception to that would be like fraud or misrepresentation or something really outlandish, or they lose eligibility due to an employment situation or something like that. But if you call an insurance company and they tell you, yes, something is covered, or they give you a predetermination of benefit or anything like that, that would indicate that the service would be paid, this bill would hold the insurance company accountable to that information, which I love because this is just a real hot spot for me. I can call and talk to 4 different people and get 4 different answers from the same dental insurance company, depending on who answers the call. And more importantly, if the insurer fails to comply with that information and fails to pay, I can bill the insurance company for my full fee and it won't go on to the patient. I love what's happening in Pennsylvania. Other states take notice. I think this could be an interesting one to watch. Another big activity that happened just this week was, let's go back a couple of weeks. Colorado, actually a couple months, went into effect June 30th. Colorado passed a bill, huge bill, had a ton of dental reform information in there. They kind of like North Carolina, when we do a dental modification, we open up the Dental Practice Act and we go through all of the different nuances within it. Colorado did the same thing. Opened up the Practice Act and said, what do we need to deal with while we're inside this particular legislation? We're going to knock off all the things and then close it back up and put it back in to legislation. In this particular bill, they passed that the dental board ultimately determined that dental service organizations could no longer own practices in Colorado. And in fact, dentists that were working for practices that were not owned legally by a dentist would also be held for disciplinary action as well. Well, what do you think the Association of Dental Support Organizations did? They jumped right in and filed legal challenge against the Colorado Dental Board. Now, this is going to be a really interesting one to watch because, as you know, this is a heated debate in many states on what it looks like for dental service organizations to own practices and to operate. And in fact, my own state has really changed the language recently as well, more in favor of DSO. So we're going to watch this very closely to kind of see what happens and what we can interpret from that. Because if the ASDO or ADSO is successful against Colorado and determining that the dental board has no jurisdiction on whether or not dental service organizations can own practices in a state, this could become something that federally will get looked at. So anyway, very interesting time in our world. Hey, another interesting discussion. Fluoride has been a very hot topic for a couple of years, especially since Kennedy has been in charge of the CDC and the Human Health Services Organization. And we've been talking about municipal water supplies and fluoride. Well, wouldn't you know that just a little kink in the system got thrown in when we started having this dispute with Iran? Now, actually, our fluoride distribution channels are being compromised, and many municipalities' supply of fluoride is getting shrunk, and they're no longer able to access the amount of fluoride that they want to maintain the certain levels. So Milwaukee in particular just put out a notification to their public team and also to the citizens who are receiving public water that their fluoride levels would be lowering down as they're sort of adjusting to the fact that they're having to switch vendors and supply chains in order to access it. It sounds like a lot of our fluoride is actually sourced and distributed to us from overseas. And as distribution channels are being compromised in the Strait of Hormuz, we're not getting the quantity of fluoride into the US that we were once receiving. So this is very interesting. I don't know if all of these things will coincide together or if ultimately it will cause a decrease in municipal fluoridation and then they just will never go back to original numbers. That's the way these things go sometimes. So we'll just have to watch to see. Last big piece of information I wanted to share with you tonight is that HIPAA compliance is going to be changing and we need to be watching this very closely. We haven't had a major update in HIPAA compliance in probably over 2 decades. So I know I'm still training from some of the same ADA manuals that we bought many years ago because it really hasn't updated since then. But we're seeing some major changes starting to come together. And I frankly am a little bit concerned about the depth of some of this because a lot of these things are going to be a little bit easier to manage on a large scale in hospitals and other things. But for small practices, some of these are going to be very difficult. First, stronger cybersecurity protections, including mandatory vulnerability scanning, enhanced encryption standards, multi-factor authentication, and a more detailed incident response requirement. So for the first time, we're going to see some major updates. It looks like we're not going to see that until 2027, but you can go ahead and take a look at some of the updates that are being proposed. I'll share a link with the producer so we can put it in the chat, which at least you could start to look at easy things that you could implement that wouldn't require a huge, turnover of your current policies, and also some of the financial implications that I'm sure will happen when more regulation is passed down. One last thing I have to note from the amalgam story from last week. A lot of controversy in the topic, people for and against amalgam, and I totally get it. But the 2 comments that came out of it that I absolutely have to bring to attention. Number 1, will this eventually eliminate our need to have the amalgam separator? We talked about that a little bit last week. But more importantly, if we're going to eliminate amalgam from the deck and we're no longer allowed to place it, I absolutely implore that this come alongside with the reducing a filling to an amalgam as a benefit through insurance company. That has to go away. So for those of you who don't know, if I do a composite filling or a tooth colored filling for a patient, some insurance companies will reduce it to an amalgam benefit or the silver filling and then reduce compensation, which either means I eat that or the patient has to pay more for a composite, as if it's some type of upgrade. Some upgrade filling if you choose to get composite. That is archaic. It's very old and outdated, but still happening today. If we're going to get rid of amalgam, we absolutely have to get rid of the downgrade. That's got to go. They need to be in simpatico with each other. RFK, if you're listening, we'll get rid of amalgam. You get rid of the downgrade. And with that, that's the news.